And welcome back. This week, we are having the ultimate guide to teaching your beginner friends the ways of Commander. I'm Levi.
I'm Jacoby.
And I'm Joe.
And this is the Thought Vessel. Welcome to the show.
So, growing up, we all had those classes that we absolutely loved, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a very weak yeah.
Two of us had a class we loved. Jacoby's still on the bench.
Yeah, just like, not loved. It was not, oh my God, I have to tell people about that day.
No, I don't got a whole lot of those. I do have a class I rather enjoyed.
I feel like Jacoby's upbringing was more of the fun in school was not having polio kind of a vibe.
The fun in school was not finding a locker that someone wanted to see if I fit in.
I feel that. I can definitely feel that.
The problem is I've been 6 foot something since I was like 15 or 14.
So they really had to cram you in there.
They really had to try and hope that my hands didn't reach them first.
Throwing hands, the Jacoby method.
Straight up. Tried and true method. If something doesn't work, does throwing hands actually solve the problem? If no, figure out if throwing hands can solve the problem.
And this is how wars get started. But yeah, if we've had like our favorite classes, like one that I absolutely loved through the entirety of it was my Introduction to Psychology AP class in high school.
Ooh.
Because I loved learning more about the human condition. I loved the assignments that we did. We watched K-Pax in class. It was like, we watched a whole bunch of different movies in that class. And it was, in fact, pretty educational because all of them had to do with some concept in psychology. K-Pax was a fugue state. We had A Beautiful Mind with schizophrenia. We even watched some Dr. Phil talking about OCD and how this one girl could not touch the pillow of a kid she was babysitting because she then thought that she was the kid. OCD gets really bad. It is not just, I'm going to do this a number of times. It is, I'm associating this action with something else could be really out there.
I wouldn't know if this is the right term for phrase, but we're going to use it because I can't think of it anyway. Funny enough, I struggle with like some of those internal issues. Like I have to adjust certain things a certain way. I'm that way about knives. Like if they don't sit a certain way on certain surfaces, I'm like, this is extraordinarily terrible. This will hurt somebody.
Yeah, but while that is actually a very reasonable thing to do, it's more of the unreasonable that it goes into the OCD.
Well, I'm saying like when I say hurt somebody, I'm thinking, oh, someone's going to pick this up with their hands and then immediately throw it into their foot, like through their foot.
I mean, at that point, I think Darwinism just kind of takes over.
Yeah, that's a little bit like Darwinism.
I suppose, but it's an intrepid thought. So when I was learning from my my good Uncle Kai, we learned really early with his classes and everything's about how you handle sharp objects. Because in the past, he learned from a blacksmith and he's a leather worker of many, many years. And we discovered that no matter how you hand somebody something, they're going to find the worst way to grab it from you that's either going to cut you or them. And I've watched people slice themselves to the bone and it's like, no. And he's experienced people being extraordinarily stupid. So we developed a different method to do all that stuff. And I do it to this day. I place things on surfaces and I'm like, you will not take this from me. You will take it from the surface. Pick it up. Don't grab it from me. None of that. Bad.
Weirdly enough, I will hand you the knife while I have like part of my hand covering the knife and covering the handle. Just here, take it.
No, bad. Stop.
I think Joe just wanted to hold your hand.
Yeah, he really does, though.
So was that the best class that you've ever had?
No. Although because a lot of those weren't really classes, those were just us having our teaching moments. My favorite class was Deep Dives in DIT, or Divers Institute of Technology. So Deep Dives was the final course of the Divers Institute, the final certification you get, where you have to go to extraordinary depths. I say extraordinarily, it's like, what?
That's pretty deep.
Yeah. But I say extraordinary. It's not really that extraordinary, but to the common person going like 280 plus feet is like, whoa. Funny enough, with that comes this story about how we had someone freak out. It was interesting to deal with. So when you go deep diving, if you go down fast enough, because You can accelerate and it'll give you certain kinds of feelings.
You get
One
the
of
bends and whatnot.
not the bends, that's if you come up too fast, but it's called narking out. You get kind of the equivalent of getting really high. Like your senses get all bubbly, you get funny and laughable, and you're like, you find things funny that you normally wouldn't.
Would not have thought that was called narking out, because narcolepsy is you're wanting to sleep, or you're a narc and you're talking to the police about it.
Yeah, I don't know why it's called what it's called, but that's what it is. The experience I had was we had a guy, we had 4 of us on a platform. We went 286 feet down, and they asked us how fast, and I looked them dead in their eyes and I said, send it. So in about, I want to say 14 seconds, we hit 286 feet. We went down fast. Great time. It was wonderful. I did not get narked out. The guy across from me, narked out of his mind. And he was sitting here, he's like, whoa. Like he looked at his hands like they were made of muffins.
Ah, yes. The tried and true. Full send, muffin button.
Right.
Do you know the muffin hand?
I know the muffin hand, and it's on mine.
The short and skinny, what happened is he's looking at his hands. He's like, I can't deal with it. And I'm like, you okay, buddy? I can't do it. I'm like, what can't you do, buddy? I'm going to take it off. And he reached for the pins on his helmet.
No, don't do that.
And he pulled one of them, and I had to grab him. And the rest of it was like, they look over, they see me like gripping his hands onto the platform we're on. We had to hog tie him with duct tape onto the platform. Went straight up. Instructor's like, what the heck is wrong with you? What are you doing? And he's just sitting there like bugging out.
Yeah, no. I think the full send was in fact really bad for that one dude.
Sometimes you don't know that it's going to happen until it just does. One of our classmates didn't feel it ever until the very last time he dove. I never got to feel it. We went quick. I'm just like, yay, this is normal. The only difference is that I have way less visibility and I need way more lights.
That's fair. It is in fact dark in the ocean.
Yeah, you hit 100 feet and there's 0 light. None lights whatsoever.
And what about you, Mr. Teacher?
I had so many good classes I went to 2 different universities because I transferred after my freshman year, and we had a lot of really good teachers, some that weren't as good. Someday I might tell you about the person who lied on their resume and got the job.
I mean, there's someone who in fact designed the Star Wars posters that got the job by lying about knowing Photoshop.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. In this case, it definitely backfired on them, where they were quote unquote promoted to become a 3rd grade teacher somewhere, from a college professor to a 3rd grade teacher. So we'll get into that another day. Promoted. Probably one of my favorite classes I took was at Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois. We needed to have a kind of social studies, political science type of class. It was a liberal arts school, so you had to do a little bit of everything. One of the classes that one of my friends kind of tipped me off to, because at the time I was playing a lot of HeroClix, so I had a lot of friends that were doing those kind of things. And it was a politics of science fiction class. And they went over a bunch of different science fiction lore of different types and looked at the political structures, and we kind of assessed how it would work, what that would look like in a normal society. It was by far one of the most fascinating classes, just kind of diving in deeper on like Star Wars and Star Trek and things. And it definitely gave you more of an appreciation for the writing.
Nice.
I would love it so much, and I would be so good at it, and everyone would hate me.
Actually.
No, straight up. There have been nerd fights I used to have in my high school. They'd be like, yeah, but, you know, the dark Sith crystals and blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, well, you're only a quarter right, and here's all of the lore that says you're wrong. But hey, you can believe that. That's fine.
And that's the thing, like with that class, like it wasn't as much of like a kind of a nerd off. It was just a lot of people from different backgrounds and stuff, because some people just needed that credit. And they were just going in and just kind of learning about these different books and small, and short films and stuff like that too. And just kind of just almost it turned into like a science fiction appreciation class, where there wasn't really like any like debates about the lore. It was just kind of diving in and kind of experiencing what it would be like. It was really fascinating.
You know, that's actually how the anime club when I was in high school kind of functioned, where it wasn't so much like debates over like, oh my God, this anime is cool. Or it'd be like when we watched a lot of it, we would study it for culture. There was a show we studied during anime club, and we ended up discussing like traditional Japanese clothing and behavioral culture difference in the show versus like what we experience.
As humans, we love to create hierarchies and things like and always try to stack things. That's why like instead of appreciating a basketball player, it always turns into, well, how do they compare against like LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Kobe?
Well, yeah, and that's just the collation of data because humans will find patterns in things that don't have patterns.
Or they will discover a pattern that no one really thought to track of until suddenly someone points it out and goes, yeah, we should probably make some data about that.
That's how we get kind of the running joke of like all Star Wars fans hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's
Like if you like Star Wars, you hate Star Wars. It's just inherent.
Everyone's got like one of the trilogies that they love, and everything else that's not that or like the animated Clone Wars is just absolute garbage.
Jacoby got the stink face going.
Don't be mad, I'm right.
I like Star Wars.
Then you hate Star Wars. That's how this goes.
No.
I'm sorry. This is just the rule of the internet.
I feel sorry for the writers and stuff. It's like, I'm going to write this and like everyone's going to love it and hate it at the same time.
Well, see, it is just a fact of like any fandom. We use Star Wars as an example. No one hates the fandom more than the fans themselves. Legitimately. They will find some issue somewhere that they are like, I don't like that specifically.
I have a lot of participation in this MMO called Elsword, which is, for short, a Korean MMO that's like very anime-esque. And I've been playing it long enough to know like every slice of lore. And I know you're right, and it makes me mad.
Because eventually something gets big enough that you will find something to hate about it.
And Magic players are no exception to this rule.
In fact, they're probably one of the main things that we see on like Twitter discourse, Facebook discourse, any social media, anywhere.
There are some archetypes that I love to hate, like elves. Elves and magic disgust me to my core. I hate them so much.
Yeah.
Do I know how to pilot an elf deck? Of course. Everyone does.
You just let the elves go burr.
And in fact, they're pretty easy to teach people.
And that will transition us into our lesson today. We're going to be going over how people learn from a psychological standpoint and then how this relates to teaching someone our lovely game of Commander. So the term that we're looking at today is called Bloom's Taxonomy. I come originally from an education background. One of the things we learn early on is about Bloom's Taxonomy. It is the different steps in which people learn a particular subject.
I think it's funny that it's Bloom's Taxonomy with Bloomberg literally releasing their pre-release this week.
It's almost like we planned it. We didn't plan it.
Look, us plan things? No. We plan very minimally.
To Levi's dismay.
Yes, to my dismay.
Looking at what makes us cool.
So there is normally 6 steps in this process, and we're going to kind of break down each and every one and kind of what it looks like for a Commander player. Step 1 is remembering. So this is just going to be, they can recite something back to you. So what does First Strike do? First Strike deals combat damage of 4, normal damage, that kind of a thing.
And you lost me. I forget things all of the time.
Oh, this is the only thing I'm really good at.
Step 2 is understanding. This is more a little bit towards application where you can understand, okay, if I go and I attack, I don't have to worry necessarily about that blocker because I have First Strike and I can deal the damage before they can.
Never mind. This is the one I'm really good at.
And another one that I'm really bad at because, wait, what's that card do? Oh, I forgot that it worked that way.
Hey,
oh, no.
Hey, Joe.
Reconnaissance be damned.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Trample Death Touch.
All right. Step 3 from there is applying. This is going to be applying what you've learned in a certain capacity. So for schools, this might be a matter of an essay or homework, things like that. Next is analyzing. So this is actually looking at a situation, making determinations about it. Then you have evaluating. So this is determining if something is good or bad. And then you have creating. This is going to be the final tier. So if you were ever in school and you had to do a group project or you had to create a song using this pattern or something in music class, they were looking at your highest level of Bloom's Taxonomy to make sure you understood.
I also see how you rush through those last 4 steps, not giving us a word edgewise to, yes and.
We're about to go through all of these one by one.
No, we need to have quips.
I'm only good at half of these, man.
All right, well, let's start with step 1. So this is going to be, you have a brand new player. They're just going to try to be getting the basics down. So this is going to be understanding keywords, learning to read the card as it would explain the card, unless it doesn't. Erratas are really hard for new players.
Erratas are really hard for new players, but also just before even reading the card, it's also just understanding the steps and phases of the game, because those can also trip up players. It's why the heuristic untap, upkeep, draw is drilled into almost every new Magic player, is because those 3 steps can be the hardest to remember for someone new.
The biggest thing with learning our game comes with the understanding that the learning curve is very front loaded. There's having to consider turn order, priority, all that thing, all the little minute parts. But the key is to make it digestible. So starting with, hey, this is the stuff in your turn. Then getting into, this is what you can do in your turn. Then go, this is what you can do outside of your turn. And then building on that.
It can be difficult on if you should start with what cards do versus how the turn is structured.
What I would suggest here, and someone in this step, and I've got some new players that I'm teaching right now. One of them, we'll just call him Cole because that's his name. He's currently learning. He had one of his favorite streamers started playing on their stream, so he's wanting to learn how to play.
Just doxing that, man.
I didn't give you his last name.
Just doxing that, man. Sorry, Cole, wherever you are.
Cole, you're wonderful.
I'm not sorry. Yep.
But when you have someone who's just in the remembering stage of learning, you're going to want to play a game of Commander, mostly just getting creatures out and going to attacks and blocks. Like, everyone play at sorcery speed. Don't worry about the stack or anything at the moment. Just let them get through the basics of attacking, blocking, taking damage. If lifelink's a factor, gaining that life back. Let them get through the motions, because they don't really have the wherewithal at the moment to understand much more than that. So you're going to overwhelm them.
And even then, there are still some argument to say that Commander probably isn't the most beginner friendly. You can certainly teach people using Commander because you get to introduce so many fun concepts that somebody might want to latch onto, especially if they're coming from other card games. One of the easier ways to teach someone is doing like a 1v1 60 card standard, because it's a very small pool and you don't really need to teach them too many things.
Or even buying those starter decks that every local game store will have. You just buy 2 of them, they play against each other. Not a lot of flashy stuff going on, but it's a good way to kind of go through the motions.
Another portion to also keep in mind, sometimes it's not so much about teaching them the complexity, but more finding something they can draw their attention to, typically a theme. For example, one of the other people I've recently been talking to, they're a friend in Canada, how I got them to get better at Magic is they discovered they really liked horrors, like the creature type. And I went, hey, there's a precon out there with a lot of pretty alright stuff that has enough to really teach you how to make that archetype work. And they started looking at the cards, and then they started asking questions like, what's instance? What's sorcery? Like, the interest of the archetype was enough to engage them to ask the necessary questions, so that it was less dependent on me instructing them and them being curious enough to let me teach them.
I will also say that with Arena becoming pretty much their premier online format, MTGO is still quite used, but not as much as Arena. Arena also built in a tutorial for newer players, because they knew that anyone who's like, well, I kind of want to play Magic, well, here's this free client that you don't need to put any money into. And they developed a very decent tutorial system for them to get familiar with the turns, get familiar with the different types of cards, different kinds of keywords, stuff like that. Even breaking it down to the colors as well, and what the colors usually do well.
The biggest thing when it comes to, if you want someone to express interest in learning your game, or you're trying to teach somebody, it's really big on engagement.
And this brings into our second tier here as far as Bloom's Taxonomy is concerned. This is the understanding. So this is going from just being able to regurgitate back to you like what flying does, what reach does, into starting to put things together. So understanding what the different card types are and starting to put things together like, okay, so this human gives all my other humans +1/+1. So they're bigger now, which means I can do a double block and take out your creature. Those kind of things.
Hi, wakarimasu.
Or having things like there's a creature that says when your stuff dies, and knowing that blocking is better for you because you get an effect out of it. Instead of having to question whether this is good or not, you can remember, oh, right, this is a reason I did this.
Or the difference between dying and exiling, because they have differences. If it says leave the battlefield, that applies to both, as well as it going back to your hand. But there's just the understanding of what dies means, what goes to exile, goes this, that, and the other.
And then as far as what you should be doing with people in this particular realm, this is where they are going to start borrowing commander decks that you might own, keep it more on the simple side, and let them ask as many questions as they need to.
No, I'm going to let them borrow Cody.
Or
No.
this is also the step where instead of borrowing decks, this is the step where players choose to become more observant rather than completely hands-on, where they come to a table, they recognize like either the person who taught them or someone they know is skilled, and watching them commit to their turn. Like, oh, okay, he decided to tap this way, or oh, okay, this is what he has in his hand, and this is the type of action he chose.
If we look at step one as this is the lesson, this is what you need to learn about the thing. Step two is the actual testing of it to see if you retained the information and understood it.
And then this is also between steps 1 and 2. This is where shows like Game Nights, which are gameplay episodes on YouTube that actually have some interviews and kind of going through the thought process with the players, why they're doing what they're doing, become very helpful, especially because Josh and Jimmy do a really good job of having it feel more cinematic, where you always know, even if you don't know how to play, what's going on. So as you're going through, they actually kind of get committed to like actually what's happening in the game. It almost feels like a movie.
And especially because throughout the entire gameplay, they are writing notes about what their thoughts are right then and there, so that when it goes to the interviews, because they've done the episode stating how those get filmed, that all of the interviews happen right after the game, and the entire process for them takes 10 hours. Imagine focusing on that one game for 10 hours.
I could do it, but I'm going to sleep for 20 afterwards.
I think I could do it, but the editing and the requirements thereafter would toast me.
Absolutely.
Obliterate me.
It's why extra turns episodes really quick and don't have that.
A lot less editing to do, and those I enjoy a bit more because especially some of the extra turns episodes are a bit more spicy decks. So
I just want to see the game.
So I'm excited about those. But step 3 here would be, now we've gone from remembering and understanding, we're going into applying. So this is going to be, they can still ask questions. It's always good to ask questions, but this is where they're going to start piloting on their own and making their own attacks.
This is their internship.
This is the, hey, we talked about that horrors precon. I made a bunch of edits. I've piloted a bunch, made 1 or 2 new edits. I'm here to test my knowledge against you now.
Now, we're not at the point where you can ask them to see what's going on the table and make proper threat assessment yet, but they can play the game on their own. So this is going to be a lot more proactive type of decks, not as much reactive. Just this is where your typal decks are really going to come in handy, where it's just, I'm going to make a bunch of dudes and I'm going to start attacking places and try to keep myself alive.
I say internship because that's usually, at least in any kind of higher education, that's where you're going to be able to do the application of the technique while not necessarily being in a position where they're going to just leave you alone with it.
And this is also the beginning of the self-discovery of what they like to do. You know, this is probably the curvature point where you might see them pick up a Cranko deck because they discover they like to make a bunch of dudes, or they lean from typal into some cool niche or strong niche because they are starting to develop their taste, but it's not quite right there yet.
Yep. And speaking of decks, this is where this normally doesn't happen because usually commander players get excited, but this is the perfect time to get your player that you're trying to teach their own commander deck, one that they can constantly be playing, getting familiar with the cards. So a lot of this is going to be a pre-constructed deck because they don't need to go out and try to make all these decisions by themselves and get overwhelmed. This is what we have. This is what the theme is, and moving forward. If you are going to provide a deck for them, or if they're going to ask you for suggestions, I would recommend buying a pre-constructed deck with as vague of a strategy as possible, which opens up a lot more doors for additional upgrades in the future. if we're looking at the Bloomborough precons, the Squirrel Typal deck looks like a lot of fun. It can definitely be very, very strong, but there isn't a whole lot of things you can add to the deck that's going to make it stronger, and Wizards isn't going to consistently print squirrels left, right, and center.
And stuff like Conspiracy and Maskwood Nexus makes it really good if you make something that's not necessarily a squirrel, but then becomes a squirrel through that, and you get to make 2 of them at your end step, and that could have been like the 10/10 Eldrazi from a Desolation Twin.
This also is included with stuff like the Demir Wilhelt deck, which has a very strong face commander. The cards inside the deck have just enough to really get you to understand where it's going, but it has a little bit of wiggle room to really let you eventually discover some paths that aren't straightforward.
Wilhelt, I think, was probably one of the better pre-constructed decks they have put out for Commander in recent memory.
Because I know that I still watch a lot of the professor's videos on the precons, because a lot of the deconstructions versus him, his scriptwriter, all of them going into and analyzing these decks to see if they're good for veteran players, if they're good for non-veteran players, if they're good for both, if they're good for neither. A lot of those help understand where you might want to go just a pre-constructed deck. Also, the professor is just a good dude.
Yeah, he's a wonderful human being. Every time I see him, I say hi to him. He doesn't remember me, but he was always super polite.
Which is fair, but he's meeting thousands of people.
No,
per time.
I get you.
Yeah, the fact that he has 1 million subscribers, of course he's going to be like, well, I know the person. And usually it'll come to like the very small knit group that he has for like Shuffle Up.
Oh, no, absolutely. All I'm getting at is that even though he doesn't obviously recognize me, he's always the most upfront, polite, and like tries to treat you like, oh yeah, you're a common friend. It's nice to see you again. Da, da, da. Like he does the niceties you're supposed to do as a good content creator.
Until you get onto Shuffle Up and Play, and he's like, oh, can I get the initiative back? No, screw you.
Can I have the initiative? No.
And as far as the newer commander decks to come out, if you were looking for recommendations, the human Riders of Rohan, Lord of the Rings, I think is one of the better one they put out. It incorporates the Monarch, which is a very fun theme. And humans is a very, very deep creature type that is consistently getting extra cards that technically could go into the deck. And it does provide the ability that in the future, if they wanted to change up the colors and go to Wooburg, or if they wanted to go to Abzan or Selesny or something, they could do so. I think it gives them a lot of avenues to move around, and Lord of the Rings cards are always fun.
Yeah, and Eowyn, who was the front runner of that deck, I believe, was
super strong.
So strong.
Super strong. Either that, of the 4 precons that have just come out from Bloomborough, I would recommend the Family Matters. It is a vague enough strategy that you can kind of let the player do whatever they want. You can worry a lot about enter the battlefield effects. You can go with more of a token strategy if you want to. There's a lot of different avenues, and it's built pretty solid out of the box if you're just wanting to just have something to play.
Whereas probably more entrenched players and players that have not even touched the archetype, I honestly would recommend the group hug deck. What's her name? It's Miss Bumbleflower. Just the fact of cast spell, give another player a card, put a +1/+1 counter on thing, make it flying. It's really interesting.
And I do like that we're getting more group hug that's directed versus everyone's going to draw, everyone's going to ramp, and then one player is going to take a substantial advantage on that and run away with the game out of the gate.
Honestly, that one is really good for step 4 off of your script here.
Analyzing, of course. So this is where threat assessment starts coming into play. This is where you can expect your new player to be able to look at a board. They can always ask questions like, hey, who do you think the threat is here? But we have more realistic expectation of, okay, I see Avacyn over there. Avacyn is a problem for me. I'm going to use my swords to plowshares and get rid of it. Before this, you're kind of just focusing on yourself.
I think that this step is one where people just continuously come back to, because you have to use it after your games to see where I may have up.
Where did I go wrong?
And just to be clear here, with a lot of commander players, a lot of people don't leave step 4, where they will just kind of hover around applying and analyzing. Some groups that play at a smaller power, where they don't, like, they just use precons and they never upgrade anything, they might just stay around this if they're not looking to apply themselves further. And that's okay. Yeah, that's totally fine. This is the analyzing. So this is where it's no longer just about you, and you have to now look at everybody else, which before this is a bit of a daunting task because you have to worry about 4 times the amount of cards now.
Yeah, seriously.
Moving on from analyzing, we get to evaluating. This is going to be, normally the player, this is kind of the fun part, is you'll have a player that will start asking you questions and they'll kind of tell you that they're in step 5 where they're like, hey, this new card that came out, I think this would go pretty good in my deck. And it's really exciting to see that. But the hard part in step 5 is they can see something's good for their deck. It's hard for them to find out what's bad or just kind of good in their deck to know what to cut.
Yeah. And especially when you get to the next step, which we will discuss, and they have this, well, this card is good, and this card is good, and this card is good. And then, oh my God, they have a 150 card deck list.
Before the lands.
Everything is so cool. Where have I gone wrong?
And it's always fun. And this is where, understanding the ratios, how much card draw, how much ramp, how effective it can be if you can get cards that can do both. Removal, board wipes. And that gives them a kind of a good stencil to work off of. So it's not just super daunting and overwhelming. But evaluating is just going to be knowing like what's good and bad for you. Also helps a little bit in actual gameplay where they can kind of see like, oh, there's a stacks piece that's hitting on artifacts. That sucks for my opponent, but I don't have any mana rocks in my mono green deck. I'm not really worried about that.
But on the inverse, well, that doesn't seem to be affecting my opponents all that much, but it's affecting me a lot.
Exactly. Knowing like if being able to look at a card, knowing it's good or bad on the board for you versus your opponents. Because if it's really bad for one of your opponents, maybe it's their problem to deal with instead of yours.
Because you could also use that if it becomes really bad for me for getting the pieces that you need for later games where you're like, I know that's a problem for me. I need to make sure I watch out for that.
Or coming to the conclusion that you need to diversify the cards in your deck to answer the things you're weakest to. Like, oh, this is a problem I run into. It bothers other people, but not as much as it bothers me. And I don't normally draw or have what I need to deal with it. So maybe I need to add some more of the parts that let me interact with that problem.
Yeah. It's like putting an assault suit in your Voltron deck because one, you can, have your Voltron go around the table, but also it has a special text that says this creature can't be sacrificed.
Or you then start looking at the universally good cards and see why they're universally good. Your Beast Withins, your Vindicates, your Anguished Unmakings.
Generous Gift.
One of my favorite budget options, Introduction to Annihilation, since it can go into any deck and exiles the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Goes into everything. It's just good all around. It's all around.
You lost me at the end, not going to lie.
Don't worry, I was mumbling to begin with.
He mumbled in song.
Definitely trying to get there.
All I want is stuff. Give me all your things, Joe. I don't want your things, Joe.
Podcast time of death, 37 minutes.
What are you talking about?
Proud of you.
We're always dead on
We are
arrival.
officially derailed.
Dead arrival.
Moving on from step 5 here, we're looking at step 6. This is when we get to the point of we're no longer messing with precons or borrowed strategies. We're looking at actually just building something on our own. So this is going to be there's a new mythic rare creature that I pulled out of a pack. I want to build the deck around this. So this is going to be the highest on the totem pole here that you are going to need to probably assist them when they're first starting out. But this is going to know that they can apply everything that they've learned to this point and actually put together a coherent deck. And the first one they build is going to be trash, and that is okay.
Yep. We all remember our first decks. Oh boy. Rith the Awakener was my first commander deck, and that played like ass.
Mine was a Go-Go Gadget Glissa the Trader.
I was, at one point, the worst human being. I was a Yidris Storm Chaos player.
And that was your first deck?
It was a precon.
It had a win condition. It wasn't totally oblivious like a lot of these other ones are. It wasn't much better, though.
Jacob continuing the chaos hate.
I'm going to hate it until I die.
But this
It's
is
okay, chaos players.
Yeah.
I love you.
This is the highest echelon of the Bloom's taxonomy. This is when you start recommending different formats like Scryfall, EDH Rec to kind of get some ideas of what to do. Recommending different deck lists online and kind of like, okay, this is kind of like the ratio. This is how many creatures the normal deck's running, kind of get a feel for the deck. And then they can kind of use those crutches for a while. And then at some point, after you build probably 4 or 5 decks, you're going to have a good enough feel that you don't really need as much of that.
I think with at least EDH Rec, that's good for like some of the earlier steps. Once you're at step 6 and you're doing your own kind of deck brewing, usually you tend to be on Scryfall a lot more because you're going to be able to learn more about the things that we've discussed in previous episodes of just the Boolean search results that you can get the exact kind of cards that you need for that deck. Whereas EDH Rec, at least earlier on, you see what people are playing. And then even if you're not immediately understanding why it's good, that's where a lot of the evaluating comes and why you may keep it in your deck, take it out of your deck because that's not necessarily how you want your deck to function. EDH Rec is a great tool, not going to lie.
Especially when you start throwing filters in.
But it's not always going to be the best tool if you're trying to figure out how you want that deck to function.
This is also at the point where you play your deck at a consistent pace. And when you interact at the end of a game, you probably take a lot more suggestive input. Instead of just playing through the game and trying to figure it out yourself, you go, so I did this and I did this. And here's some of the cards I have to interact with what I had going on. What are your opinions of what I have in here? And you're super, super receptive to things you either have heard a little bit about or cards you haven't heard about that people go, yeah, this would probably go really well in your deck. And they go, oh, and they do either a little bit more research or they try it and then they mix and match parts that they take advice from.
Yeah, and this is where I also would recommend just discard outlets. Things that would replace a card in your hand while you discard it. Your Gaia Reach Sanitariums. Because then you get to analyze a lot more of the cards to see why you discarded it then over any other card. Is it you are discarding it more often, or was it literally just the worst card for the situation at that time? Not that it was a bad card to put into your deck, but it didn't fit at that time, and that's the only reason why you discarded it. Or was there never a right time, and maybe you could cut that for something else?
For me, whenever I'm playing a game, kind of determining what card I want to discard. Now, granted, I don't have to go to discard very often because, as you would imagine, I run a disproportionate amount of thought vessels in my deck.
I mean, if you're running a disproportionate amount of thought vessels in your decks, that means you are cheating. You're running more than one.
Like more of my decks run a thought vessel than you would think because product placement is important.
That's also a different statement. I hope you understand.
It's okay. I knew what you meant. Joe's crazy.
No, I'm going to nitpick the wording.
Now, we're just going to play one creature, 50 islands, and then 50 thought vessels and figure it out. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And it's going to be Urza, so we just top deck into more thought vessels.
Now, if you said that you run a disproportionate amount of no maximum hand size, I'd agree with you. You'd love not having to get rid of anything out of your hand.
Mostly the thought vessel because product placement is important.
Correct. Every time I see it played in a game on a stream, I'm just like, hey, look, it's the name of my podcast.
I just want to look them in their eyes and be like, let me sign your card.
If they don't know who we are, that might be a little weird.
Well, I don't say it to their face. I say it like while I'm watching. I just see it on game nights. I'm like, let me sign your thought vessel.
That They're internal monologue.
Yes. Well, external at the screen, not in a comment.
No. Now the next step. You put it into the comment.
No.
I need to sign your thought vessel. They'll never understand why, but you will.
If they ever responded and they went, if you send me one, I'll put it in a deck, I would totally do that. Bet, what is the shipping cost? I don't care that it's $35 for some stupid reason for this cardboard.
$35?
We're sending you a signed thought vessel because why not?
Is this out of the country?
Sometimes you got to set the tone.
Apparently. We're going to like the Netherlands for this person who wants that card signed.
Listen, man, if they want it signed and there's a cost to it, we're going to get there. If I see you on a video and you say yeah and you put it in the video, I'm going to put it there.
Fair enough.
I will let you know at some point on my Commander bucket list now is I'm going to a Collecticon convention and I'm going to get a Deflecting Palm signed by Chuck Norris. And someone's going to got lethally with that card. And I'm going to feel so good about it.
Makes sense.
Getting taken out by Chuck Norris. It's going to be amazing.
My reverse dream goal is to have my signature on a thought vessel and then to animate it and murder someone with it using grafted exoskeleton. Because
that is so many steps.
Oh yeah, so many steps. That's the dream though.
Are you gonna sign your own thought vessel to put it into a deck?
Well, the joke, well, maybe not my deck, but the idea is because my signature has the Phyrexian symbol.
Yeah, but it's so hard to like have somebody have it in their deck to get it out and then animate it and then graft it exoskeleton. You have to have all the cards.
I know plenty of people with enough jank to get there.
But I have the idea. And this is actually akin to the business cards that we love giving out to people. We, in fact, just buy a whole stack of thought vessels, go through it one night, just all of us sign it, and that's our business card.
Honestly, that's a plan.
I mean, we would still need a QR code.
That's fair. We put it very tiny, stamped on the card.
We could get QR code stickers.
Look,
Apology to RK Post. We're going to destroy so many cards.
that just kind of happens.
Oh no.
Did you ever hear the story about the guy from Wisconsin who owns like over 200,000 copies of Stone Rain?
That's funny.
Really likes Ponza, doesn't he?
Well, like he wanted to see if he could affect the market, so he just kept buying them. And like, he's got over 200,000. Like at that point, like who are you going to sell it to for one thing?
I mean, yeah.
And it's still like a $2 card.
Affected it the...
He has 200,000 times 2, so he's got $400,000 worth of one card.
Yeah, like that is wild. But like, you think of it that way, but you have to find enough customers. And also imagine the amount of posting you'd pay just to get them out to people.
You would be losing.
You'd be dropping like $250,000 on stamps and envelopes. That is brutal.
Can't do it. I don't think that's worth it. Hi, this card, all of these together, $400,000. How easily are you going to get that? Not. Just not.
You walk up to the nearest LGS and you go, you buy cards at X value, right? Here's 200,000+ of this one card.
It reminds me of the South Park episode with the gnomes that are stealing everyone's underwear.
Yep.
Step 1, buy a Stone Rain. Step 2, Step 3, profit.
Yeah, like, you got so off track on that one.
Yeah, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. But that is our lesson here on Bloom's Taxonomy, how the learning process works for Commander players. Our draft today is going over commanders that would be appropriate for beginners if you're looking at building a deck from scratch for a new player. So we're going to go ahead and take a look here at the draft order. I have the first pick. Joe, you are second. Jacoby, you are at third. You have the fourth pick. Joe, you'll have the fifth. I'll have the sixth. Going back and forth for 4 rounds as usual.
Now, is this for people who are building their own decks for the first time, or are we building the decks for them?
That's an excellent question. It has to cover both. Just very solid beginner commanders.
All right. I think I can get that.
Without further ado, we will jump in. The first one I'm going to cover is it has the potential to be a CDH commander. It's still very good in casual. It deals with Typal. It has an abundance of cards that support it. My first overall pick is Myrel, Shield of the Argive.
Okay. I thought it might be a little bit complicated that people can't interact on their turn. I could see it.
So I see that as a bonus because you don't have to worry about anyone doing any kind of interaction on your turn. You can just focus solely on what you're doing. And if there's any spells that you want to make sure resolve without any issues, you can do it on your turn at sorcery speed. For those of you who don't know, Myrel, Shield of the Argive is a legendary human soldier, a 3/4. Says during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. When Myrel, Shield of the Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens where X is the number of soldiers you control. One thing to keep in mind, they do not come in attacking, so they don't need to worry about that at all. It's just a matter of playing out Myrel, having a bunch of soldiers, build up a board. It can scale in power level, so it can still stay competitive without having a very complicated plan. There's enough catch-up white nowadays. You can continuously cast Myrel if it gets destroyed, and it cares more about the big board versus the commander itself. So if you get to a point that your commander no longer can play, you can still be functionally in the game.
I can see how that makes sense.
So that is my number 1 overall. We are going with Myrel. Joe, you up for number 2?
So I'm going to be bringing back my old nickname from our group chat, the Woo Burgermeister, and I'm going to be choosing a Wooburg commander as the first pick.
Not going for color complexity at all or anything. Just grab the whole damn rainbow.
Because if you want people to really try out anything, no better commander than good old-fashioned Chromat.
Interesting.
Chromat has been the pinnacle for, I want to just try a strategy. And if I like the strategy, then work from there on what kind of commander I would need from there. Chromat is there so that you can try out all of the cards, see what's good, see what's not, and just play. And I think that's one of the important things that if you are trying to get people into the game is just play.
That is fair. If we ever get the chance to be sponsored by Skittles, I think we definitely need to go about that.
You know,
Play the rainbow.
Hey.
Taste the rainbow.
Skittles, sponsor us, please. I'm begging.
Not your Skittles. We don't need the Infect Dragon. We need 5 colors.
Oh, you're lame.
Look, I don't know if you've had black Skittles. I don't think that sounds appetizing.
That sounds wonderful.
So would that be like a black licorice Skittle?
Yeah.
Or it's like the Airheads mystery, and it's just a mystery flavor.
That was white.
Yeah, but the concept still applies. It's not the color that you think it's supposed to be.
Also, did y'all ever try those like zombie Skittles? You know what I'm talking about? Like around Halloween, they put them out and like one of them tastes like absolute booty cheeks.
No.
No.
I usually try to avoid those products.
So yeah, come out around Halloween. We're going to have you try that because it's kind of funny. There was a mom that was giving it to their kids and she didn't realize it was the zombie Skittles. And the kids were complaining that they didn't like the taste and she was calling them ungrateful and stuff. And she was giving them like dead frog and a bunch of other random terrible flavors.
Oof.
Nice. My 2 first picks are lame, but they're beginner friendly.
We like lame.
We're going to go with Lathril, Bleed of the Elves, because nothing says teach like teaching elves. Blech. And then an example I used on this episode, Wilhelt, because nothing says generally easy to teach than zombies.
Yeah, just full on into the kindred.
And fortunately, both of these are at the heads of pre-constructed decks, so these are pretty easy to pick up. None of them had anything super crazy as far as a chase single in them, which caused the price to spike up. So those are very solid pre-constructed options.
Easy to teach, easy to show, easy to upgrade. Can go the distance when you get there.
Because you pretty much just go onto Scryfall and go Oracle Kindred type. Oh, hey, this card's good. This card's good. This does the thing. It's really hard to miss with Kindred.
You can't whiff. Anyways, Joe, what's your next one?
So in the same strain as Myrel, but a little bit different, we're going to be giving our players something that, 1, can't be countered, and 2, all their spells usually can't be countered. We're going to go with Serac Dragonclaw.
Serac, love it.
Because it's a very simple, I want to play Big Stompy. And this also allows you to play the Big Stompy without too much stack interaction. Not to mention that it also has a way to get in with the Big Stompy.
And it's punching a bear in the face.
Yeah. Back when I started deck building and wanted to build a whole slew of decks, I actually really, really liked Serac Dragonclaw and wanted to make it work.
See, when I first started playing, getting in more into Commander, I was in a very counter-heavy meta area. So I built Serac and just like Eldrazi and all the broken stuff you could possibly have. And it was just Tamer beat face. And it was amazing.
Man, that's crazy.
And we never had those problems again.
But yeah, no, Serac Dragonclaw is a great beginner friendly to get in and beat face.
Absolutely. So I am going to pick in that realm of kind of the Timmy, I'm going to go with King Timmy. And that is Galta Primal Hunger.
You know, when you said King Timmy, I was thinking immediately of Kenrith.
Interesting.
Because he's a king.
Well, yeah. So is Brago.
He also can do anything.
And that, I think, Kenrith can do everything, but that is definitely analysis paralysis. Galta, Primal Hunger, is just a good old-fashioned 12-12 trample. Costs less for every power you have. Just play a bunch of green spells. Get out your giant dinosaur. Start smacking people in the face. You're going to have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of triggered abilities you got to worry about. Very straightforward. Everyone respects Galta. Everyone loves Galta. My second pick, 6th overall, it is Back to Me. The next one I'm going to be going over here is, this is going a little bit, I would have to put a little asterisk here, as I think this would work a lot better as like a landfall deck. And that is Keanu Santiro of Meletis, aka K&T. Because having a commander that says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, each player may put a land card from his or her hand on the battlefield when each opponent who didn't draws a card. So you get to draw a card and play a land. Your opponents get to do one of the two. So being in a spot, getting some landfall synergies and stuff, but having in a lower power deck minor support to the table where other players might be like, hey, stop hitting the group hug guy, would be helpful in not getting bullied out of a game when you're starting out. So I do like having K&T. I think it's fantastic. You get a lot of variety with the colors, and you can learn a little bit about triggered abilities and synergies like that.
Which is fair. I know that at least my pick is in the same strain as that, but it's mainly for you and 2 less colors. Also, a deck that has the potential of being really strong. I think it used to be CDH, but it's not too much anymore. And that's Tatiova, Benthic Druid.
Yeah, I think I did see it post a couple of like tournament finishes here and there. So it's still kind of on the fringe.
Because, well, it's Simic, it's 5-drop, and you're mainly dealing with lands, which if you're trying to do a land synergy, it can be a little bit more difficult in CDH because you want to be a little bit more svelte with your lands.
But you have Simic, you've got all your card draw and all your ramp. So at the end of the day, anything can happen. That's why we're seeing Nadu, and this is why we're seeing Kinnan in that format right now. There's a lot of good Simic out there.
Yeah, but even if you built it like not that powerful, playing land, drawing card, gain life, very simple to understand, very easy to progress towards whatever you may want to do with that deck as well. Because you could just have that be a landfall deck and just call it a day from there. You could also just use a lot of the benefits that is playing lands, drawing cards to fuel any amount of other strategies within those colors.
It's scalable too. So the better you get at the game and the more complex you want it, it can definitely ride up with it too. So I think it's a great addition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another good one from my list now is going to be the Frodo and Sam from the pre-con as well.
Mr. Frodo.
Yeah, it's got a very, like the other choices I had, it's got a based deck. It does something relatively good. It has some ability to be diverse. It's all around a good starter.
I can't carry this game, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you.
It is a very fascinating deck. I do run it still. I built it into more of a life gain synergy deck with some food synergy still, and then Frodo and Sam are mostly just in there to kind of just be a value engine as you're going. But just being able to kind of passively not look very threatening until it's too late for a lot of players and just continuously gain life to keep you in the game is very helpful. I think that obviously we still have a lot of favor for Lord of the Rings type cards. I think it's a great pick.
And then my last one, probably not a pick either of you expected or most people. We're going to go with John Irenaeus Shattered One. This is a Baldur's Gate card. This is an elf wizard. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent gains control of a thing you control. A creature you control. You put some counters on it, you tap it, it's goaded for the rest of the game, and it cannot be sacrificed. And then when creatures you own but don't control attack, you draw cards. So this is one of those, people usually give like really bad gifts, really interesting gifts. This is something you can build with enough different options. You can either go the super mean stuff that's really cheap to acquire as a new player, or you do some of the interesting things that are just like slow people down while also getting them to beat each other up without having to really make it too complex if you don't want to. And it provides interaction in the game that you normally wouldn't see as a new player without piloting something like this or someone specifically teching this. So it shows a different perspective for the game as a beginner that could give you some insight into things in the future.
Absolutely.
Jinx.
Mother.
Got him.
Gotcha.
Better get him that
Your final pick, Joe.
My final pick is a fan favorite from a whole bunch of people who love playing just mono black, and that's Ghoul Collar Gisa.
Ghoul Collar Gisa.
If you want to learn how to mess around in your graveyard and learn the value of sometimes sacrificing your creatures to make a wider board, this is one of those decks that allows you to learn the value of your graveyard while still giving you a benefit for your creature dying. Because 1 black, tap it, sacking that creature, creating that amount of power worth of 2/2 black zombies. Hi, I'm just going to have this instant board. But it's also, weirdly enough, I looked at all of my choices. Every single one of them is 5 mana.
Yeah. It's also slightly bugging me that we, instead of going from like 5-4-3-2 or 4-3-2-1, we went from 5 colors, 3 colors, 2 colors, 1 colors.
Yeah.
But that's just a minor ADHD rant.
Well, yeah, that's because we have 4 rounds.
You would win a 4-color commander if we had 5 rounds. Don't give me that.
I don't know.
What are you going to do? Atraxa Infect?
Yes.
Yes, actually. That's actually real fun. Man, those errant birds here again.
Flying
right
around.
at Jacoby, and not me, who also agreed with Jacoby.
Well, one of you has a Phyrexian tattoo.
I'm not going to lie to you. If we had a 5th pick, it was going to be Skittles.
There we go.
It was going to be Skittles.
I don't feel bad.
We're not even finished with the draft, and we're already talking about honorable mentions. But yeah, Gold Collar Gisa, it's such a interesting card. I would love to build her for myself. But I also think that somebody could build that and do something interesting by just saying, well, this cares about how big the things are. Let's play with big stuff and just go from there.
Well, looks like I am on the clock here with the final pick of the best commanders for beginners draft. I had this one as my second overall, but it was so similar to my rel that I didn't want to select it. But for my very last pick, I will absolutely take it. And that is Kranko Cranks, aka Kranko Mob Boss. Kranko,
Lame.
a 4-drop creature. You tap it and you make 1/1 goblin for each goblin you control. Very, very strong goblin synergy. I learned how to play off a Kranko deck. A lot of people have learned off of Kranko. Kranko is actually my oldest deck that is still in existence because there's so many goblin cards in it that it just doesn't make sense to take it apart, because what am I going to do with the Goblin Assassin? It's just going to stay right there in my binder if I take it apart. So Kranko, it's a great card, you can add more complexity to that deck as you want to. You can start adding like different combos, but you can very much just have it as just a bunch of goofy goblins that have weird vocations or funny flavor text, and then you just double up the goblins you control. And then down the line, you can make it stronger or weaker depending on what you're wanting to do.
I'm a goofy goblin, yeah. You're a goofy goblin, yeah.
No.
We're all goofy goblins, yeah. Goofy, 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 yeah.
So much singing in this episode.
I only accept Phyrexian goblins, sir.
Sorry, you
Tough.
in fact could have chosen Ovica, but you didn't.
It's not that beginner friendly. It's
Sounds
not
like-
that beginner friendly.
It's actually pretty beginner friendly. Play non-creature thing, get creature, go.
Upon further review and in response, get wrecked.
I'm not the one who got mad at Skittles.
I mean, that's true. You in fact got a little mad at Skittles.
I mean, we're talking instant speed regeneration. It's a little bit more complex for beginners, but it's all good.
It's not that complex, but yeah, sure.
I think the inflex, the little bit more complex thing,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
of the two mechanics, that's
A lot of people do treat it like toxic.
even though it's not.
Yeah, it absolutely is not, but it's a lot of people do. Was there any ones that you had on your list as kind of an honorable mention? We have noted Skittles.
I definitely had to, as I usually do. Yargle and Multani, baby's first Voltron.
Good old 18 power.
Yeah.
Also Geshath.
Gashat's a good one.
But in the same strain as like Gisa, I went with Gisa over it because Gisa's pretty much old hat at it. But Jan Jansen, the Mardu artifact, you can either sacrifice an artifact creature, get treasures, or sacrifice a non-creature artifact and get artifact creatures. I thought that would be a very interesting deck for someone who's just learning to be like, oh, well, I could do things with this. What do?
A lot of wheel spinning could be a lot of fun, especially for players that might be more interested in that kind of aristocrat style of deck, or just artifact synergies like that as well. Mardu is definitely a fun color trio to work off of.
Or you could just be like me. We spin me right round, baby. And you just spin on the wheel forever.
We love spinning on wheels.
Wheels on the bus go round and round.
Wheel of
round
Fortune.
And round and round.
Mine would probably be Uril, aka Bigfoot. Just having 5-drop creature, hexproof, so it's not going to get spot removed all the time. Just load it up with whatever enchantments you had laying around in your trade binder and go.
Another baby's first Voltron.
Yes, very much a baby source Voltron, but a lot of fun, and it's the closest thing we have to Bigfoot in the game right now until we get a cryptid secret lair or something down the line.
Yeah, but you also have like the that one hockey from like Pennsylvania.
Mothman?
No, that's West Virginia.
Yeah, but in that.
No, like that.
Region.
It's a hockey mascot. It's that orange one that has the whole bunch of fur, and he looks like he's mean mugging you all the time.
From the
From hockey.
from the Philadelphia Flyers?
No.
I don't sports. Why are you looking at me?
A lifeline.
Gritty.
Gritty, yeah.
Gritty's his name.
Yeah, Gritty.
Jacob,
I-
look at this thing. He's
No,
not mean mugging you, but he is peering into your soul.
No, I refuse to look at I'm not absorbing that into my reality.
He is
Look-
orange, or as Jacoby would say, brown.
No. You stop that.
No, it's always funny to just say every color and then brown instead.
Well, on that note, you got any finishing thoughts?
So I have a question.
That was a real hard derail right there.
Nah,
If-
screw you. Man.
Would we be able to rule 0 some green cards in a mono red deck for Jacoby?
No.
Oi. No, because there's still symbols there, man.
It's not important.
It is a little bit important. It says, hey, this symbol doesn't match any of the other symbols. Can't go in the deck.
All right. Any final thoughts before we close out?
You're lame.
Any deck can be beginner friendly if you're willing to experiment yourself. Jump into the deep end, just like you did when you were a kid, and see if you could swim.
Yes. Let me teach you the complexities of the stack. Day 2 of your adventure into Magic.
Sometimes just jumping into that deep end can give you more understanding of the game than if you just started with the simple things. It's how I learn a lot of things. I jump straight into a deep end and be like, okay, so how can I work this from here? And what rules work where? I did that with Europa Universalis 4. And all of my friends were like, yeah, you want to play the Ottoman Empire because it's usually the easiest and beginner friendly.
All right,
and I went, I want to play Ireland. And they're just like, why?
All right, so day 2. Let me teach you about layers.
So my final thought closing out here is it's going to be very tempting to try to push people to that next level on Bloom's taxonomy. They're going to get there on their own. There's going to be some players that you're going to meet with them one time, and the next time you talk to them, they're going to be on step 3 or 4, and they're buying their own pre-con, and they're fired up, and they're running through everything. There's going to be some players that, you're going to play with them 3, 4, or 5 times, and you're still in the remembering understanding where they're borrowing a deck, they're asking a lot of questions, and that's okay. People are going to learn at their different paces. The main thing is just making sure that everyone's having fun, everyone's enjoying themselves, and they're getting the most out of it that they can.
Give them what they need, not what you want.
Be a positive force for the learning curve. Do not force things that can't be learned immediately.
Unless they're talking about infect, then strike them down where they stand.
No. Be a positive force.
Strike them down where they stand.
That is all the time that we have for this episode. Just remember, this is something that you can always listen back to whenever you're teaching somebody new how to play. Apologies for all the derailing that we had during the episode, but this will be a good tool to be using in the future. Share it with some friends that are, having players that are getting into it, or, I wanted to teach my, my brother or my significant other or something how to play. Like, how would I go about doing that? This can definitely be extremely helpful for you.
And do it on their account so that we get the views.
All the views, all the listens.
Proud of you.
Look,
share
we have to do the shameless plug. If we don't do the shameless plug, we don't get plugged.
Why are you looking at me? I said do it.
I misheard you. My bad.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. Have a fantastic rest of your week.
Take care.
Bye.